Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is our FTC General Body meeting, Finding a Job in Comm with Dr. Sarah Singer. We're so delighted that she was able to come and join us today. So just a couple quick announcements before we begin. We do also have some events next week. So next week we will be having employees from L3 Harris come and talk with us, just share their experience working at L3 Harris and as technical writers in general. So the first one will be on November 8th, a Wednesday. The topic will be technical communication, engineering, and management at L3 Harris. That will take place 7 p.m. on Zoom. And then the following Thursday, so November 9th, the topic will be entering the TechCom field. We will have different speakers from L3 Harris. That is 7 p.m. on Zoom and in person. So at Health Sciences 1, for information about all of that, you can see our Discord, email, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's in a lot of different places. So those will be great opportunities to learn more and to talk to professionals who are in the field, which is always a very valuable thing. So getting into tonight's presentation, we have, like I said, Dr. Sarah Singer, who will be presenting for us. Very excited about it. So she is an assistant professor here at UCF, where she's been teaching some technical communication classes for that program. And so she's had research articles in Technical Communication Quarterly, College English, Pethio, Journal of Medical Humanities. She's currently finishing a book. So amazing person. I'm so glad that she could join us. So with that, I will turn it over to her so she can begin her presentation.
Thank you so much, Chantal, for your warm welcome. I'm so appreciative. Thank you for having me, FTC and community. First, let's just do a quick survey. One, can you hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Very good. And if at any point during the session you can't hear me, please do feel free to chime in, or Chantal is our FTC contact here. And so feel free to send her a message and let her know, and she'll let me know so we can make sure that that happens. Number two, I have put a link in our chat, which is going to a Google Doc. And if you have any difficulty accessing that, please let me know. That's the document that I'm going to use to guide our session today. And then the third thing is that I will cue you as to when it will be most beneficial to have a camera on, if you're willing to do so. Because there'll be different, parts of this evening. So we'll have some discussion. I'll do a little bit of kind of presenting or lecturing. And so there's certainly no pressure to have a camera on, but I invite you to be able to participate in whatever ways are most comfortable and accessible to you. So let's get started. Feel free to turn your cameras off. I'm going to screen share briefly that very same Google Doc that you've seen. Okay, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the Google Doc? Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I'm also going to increase the size here and make it really large because one of my personal challenges in my old age is that people screen share and I can't read it. So definitely let me know if you're unable to see this. So basically, this is just an overview. Our goal tonight is to talk about technical communication job titles and practice searching for open positions on some of the popular platforms. Our challenge is to kind of work together to brainstorm and create a list of sample position titles. As you'll see shortly, I have a list to get us started, but my list is general, and our goal is to see which of these positions exist in the real world. So if you are currently or will soon be searching for a job, what you can expect to find in your search, and of course, how to tailor your search. Because searching for a job is stressful. Give me a thumbs up if you've had some stressful thoughts about searching for a job recently. Is this something going on with our attendees? Yes, I'm glad that some of you are not stressed. That is wonderful news. But for those of you who are, I want to offer this evening as an opportunity to share some of those concerns and also hopefully to alleviate some of them. So at the end of the evening, around 6:15, we'll have an open question and answer session. Now, as I'm talking or as we're working collectively, perhaps the questions come to you at that moment. Feel free, this is on page 6 of my document. I realize this is a little bit long. Feel free to just start typing in your questions here, and that's how I'll start responding to them. You're also welcome to put them in the chat at any time or simply just to jump in when I'm talking. That's no problem. I want to make sure you're getting your questions answered. And for record keeping purposes, I'll be copying and pasting questions that were asked in the chat or typing questions that you ask me and putting them in this document so that we can have a record of those questions for people who were unable to attend. So in getting started, part of the challenge of finding a job in technical communication is figuring out what kinds of jobs people have. I want to introduce you to some resources that may be new to you or may be very familiar to you. Several of them are related to the US government, particularly the first 3. What's really helpful about these sources is sometimes when we are working hard, we are finishing our degrees, we're working, we're interning, we can lose sight of what it is we really do. And so these pages, particularly this one, ONET, give us just a really helpful overview of some of the occupation-specific things that technical communicators do. So we can also expand this list. So one thing you might notice is that this list might seem both too specific and too general. So for example, this first one, organize material and complete writing assignment according to set standards regarding order, clarity, conciseness, style, and terminology. So maybe that seems self-evident. Yes, almost everyone in the workforce has to write something from time to time, and it has to be according to that company or organization's standards. But really, this is a key task for most technical communicators. We also get into things that are a little bit more specific, doing interviews, producing material, reading journals, arranging for typing, duplication, and distribution of material. So sometimes some of these tasks are very administrative. Sometimes technical communicators are doing more marketing and communications work, and sometimes they're doing editing and all sorts of things. So I really want to encourage you to think about what kinds of tasks you may need to do. So to start that process, let's talk briefly about the things in technical communication that you like and that interest you the most. So think about the classes that you've taken. Think about the internships and jobs that you've done in which you've performed technical communication roles. Can you put in the chat your favorite part, the things that you like the most? Let's take about 2 minutes and do that. And I'll screen share that same list as we're talking, since I think it gives some good recommendations. So I want to know what your favorite parts are of being in the field of technical communication, because that's going to help you narrow your search for a job. Fantastic. We have our first entries. Some of you like editing and organizing. Other people like developing and maintaining documentation. These are both critical. What I'd like to emphasize is that a technical communicator might do both of these things or only one of them, depending on the role. So if you are someone, for example, who decides to work for a nonprofit, sometimes people in nonprofits, because of very limited funding that's based on fundraising and donors, Often those people are doing every aspect of technical communication. They are marketing, they are contacting donors, they are creating documentation, they are creating manuals, they are communicating with the public, and translating really specialist information. So you might be doing all of those things, or you might be a documentation specialist, someone who is writing help manuals, someone who is writing instructional guides, maybe specifically in the fields of engineering or computer science. So it could be that specific as well. Oh, this is interesting. We've also got people who really enjoy research. Depending on what kind of position you land in, again, sometimes research is something you'll be doing every day. And that might be research, not necessarily the same kinds of scholarly research that we often talk about in classes, but we might be trying to kind of compare and contrast different websites to see how we want our organization's website to look. Maybe we'll be conducting usability studies and research to see how to make our own products and ones that we're either selling or sharing with others more appropriate for specific audiences. And maybe, we're also thinking about editing. For some people, you might be editing code. For others, they will be in written material in English and maybe in other languages. And of course, it sounds like we've got a lot of people who really are interested in design. I certainly am one of those people too, but as we'll talk about in a minute, I am an aspirational designer. That is not my sort of main capability. So the reason that I asked you to get started by thinking about what you like is because there are a lot of options. And ultimately, the hardest and most important thing that you'll need to do is narrow down those options. Since unless you're at a nonprofit, and I am offering this information generally, some nonprofits do have people in more specific roles, but especially if you're in a small and kind of local nonprofit, you might be doing everything. And so I want you to really be thinking about what you like, as well as what you're good at. Okay, so you just shared in the chat the things that you like the most, the aspects that interest you the most in technical communication. Now it's time to think about what you're good at, especially the things that you're really good at. So think about those of you who are UCF students, ENC 4293 and 4294, those collaborative team building courses. Were you good at the teamwork? Did you enjoy being a leader? Are you a really great technical editor? Are you someone who can really take a deep dive into the details, who's got a really good eye for style? Are you someone who likes managing other people? Do you like writing collaboratively? Are you really good at design? Have you learned all these different new tools? Or are you the best at finding free online open access tools? So take a minute and think about what you're good at and add that to our chat. Okay, I can see people typing. Our first answers are starting to come in. And as they do, let me share one of the other pages that I think is going to be really helpful to you, that will also give you some ideas about specific tasks that technical communicators perform and roles that they play. Okay, I can see our chat is coming through. Let's talk about it. So we've got some people who are really good at editing, and I admire you. I'm someone who enjoys editing, but as evidenced in some of my recent publications, in the process of writing those publications, it turns out that is not my strong point. I felt like I read this book chapter 100 times before I submitted it for review. And both of my reviewers commented that there were still several errors in the chapters. Now, granted, when you write documents that are 50 to 100 pages long, maybe this is a little bit inevitable. But I definitely would not say that I am a masterful technical editor. So this is what I'm asking you to think about: what you like versus where your skill set really lies. Because one thing that I think can be confusing for students is deciding on how challenged they hope to be in their jobs. And so there's a lot of ways to be challenged. Sometimes it's like learning a new language, and maybe you're inclined in that area. Maybe you just sort of get it almost immediately. You're just really absorbing all the information. And sometimes you feel like you're stuck with a book that makes absolutely no sense to you and has no chance of doing so anytime soon. So what I'm hoping is to help people identify what will be an appropriate level of challenge for them. So it's really interesting. So for people, we have a couple people talking about working collaboratively. That's something they're really good at. And so when you think about working collaboratively, when it comes to finding a job in technical communication, this is definitely an asset. And I think you're going to want to really dive into that specific trait. Is it that you like working with one other person, with a small team, with a large team? And what role do you like to play on that team? And also, what role do you aspire to play? So do you hope to start as a proposal writer and eventually become a proposal manager? Or do you really prefer, sort of working with people as colleagues rather than as their supervisor? So identifying these differences are really important. And then there's this third part that I started to get to, which is the things that you struggle with the most in technical communication. The things that have challenged you, the things that have kept you up late at night, the things that have stressed you out. Let's take a minute and put in the chat the specific problems or challenges that you face in your technical communication work. Okay, let's see what people are adding. Yes, consistency is really a struggle. Whether we're looking for stylistic consistency in our own writing, and especially when we're working with a team, definitely a challenge. And certainly making content understandable. I think this is an issue that we all have based on the different audiences for whom we write. Right now, I'm finishing up a book that I am writing versus finishing up a book that I am reading. I am currently reading this book called Being at Genetic Risk by Kelly Pender. It's inspiration for my own book. And in terms of finishing up my book, something that it's really taught me is that it's really hard to make things consistent across 50 to 100 page chapters. That is really challenging in a way that I never realized. I'm seeing an interesting answer here as well, trying to figure out what I need to learn as a self-taught and aspiring techie, specifically how to write specific genres like case studies and white papers. Definitely a challenge, no question. And of course, unrealistic deadlines, other people's lack of planning, these are all really difficult. So what I'm hoping for you to think about and to figure out is this sort of Venn diagram. So the things that you like, the things that you are good at, and then the things that you don't like or are not very good at, because we want to decide on a career. We want to, at least for our first job, hopefully pick something that offers us a reasonable level of challenge. So let's say you're someone who really likes editing, and you're also pretty good at editing. You have evidence from working in ENC 3241, 4293, 4294, those collaboration courses. And so you've got some inkling that this is an area in which you are inclined. If that's the case, then I suggest focusing on positions that work a lot on editing. One of those positions might be a proposal writer, because proposals have to be so exact before they're submitted, especially to large funding agencies. So there are really specific requirements. And if you're a good editor, you're not only going to catch linguistic issues, but also issues in the interface. So you can make sure those proposals go through. I recently submitted a proposal myself to the National Endowment for the Humanities, and it was honestly a complete nightmare. I was up until 11:50 p.m. trying to get this submitted. And I'm not saying that I'm never up that late submitting something, but it's more unusual these days. So for me, you can see how editing is something that I do, but it's not my strong point. However, this is part of my job, but just a smaller portion. Something that I like and that I'm pretty good at is teaching. So that is a main portion of my job. So as we start talking about all these different types of jobs you can have, I want you to think about that Venn diagram and what that means for you. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and I'm going to put us into 2 breakout rooms. The point here is to start to think about what the Venn diagram looks like for you. What do you like versus what are you good at versus where are you really challenged? And I think if you can get a handle on that, at least sort of a beginning handle on it, the next part of this presentation will make a lot more sense. So in just a moment, I'm going to open all of the breakout rooms. This is a great time to turn your camera on if you're willing, and sort of at a minimum to unmute if you're able. Certainly, we also have the chat feature if that is more comfortable for you. I'll open these rooms and we're going to talk in them for about 8 or 9 minutes. So around 6 o'clock, I'll be bringing us back together unless groups seem to have finished much earlier. See you soon. All right, welcome back. I know we've got a few more people still on their way, so we'll give them just a moment.
Thank you so much for taking the time to host this event, Dr. Singer.
Oh, of course. Thank you, Joy. I really appreciate you leading your discussion room. I'm really appreciative.
No problem. It's been wonderful getting to know everyone. And yeah, I'm really excited for everyone's tech comm journeys.
I am too. And I think it's really exciting, but I can also understand why it can feel overwhelming because there are so many options. And I'm about to make it worse by showing you several of those options. Let me just see. Okay, here we go. I think everyone is coming back. Okay, most excellent. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for engaging in these really interesting conversations about this sort of trifecta, what you like, what you're good at, and what you don't like and what you're not good at. I think thinking about that is going to really help you through this next step. And I want to say in advance, what I'm about to show you might feel overwhelming. So we'll take it just step by step. So I'm going to screen share. Can you let me know, can you see my screen share? Can you give me a thumbs up? Great. So I'm back here in our technical communication document. And as I scroll down, this is here on page 2, I'm going to 2A, excuse me, list of technical communication job titles. So this is where things might look a little bit overwhelming. I have put together through just my own search, nothing official, a list of technical communication job titles. And this list has almost 50 titles on it. And so what I'm hoping this list will provide for you, well, and let me just say, I put together this list by reading through several websites, through seeing, what other people claim are technical communication job titles, through helping students search for jobs and figuring out what titles those people have, and as well as just sort of my own investigative work on the internet. So here's the thing. If you go to Indeed.com or one of our major job search sites and you put in technical communicator, you might not actually get all of the technical communication jobs. You'll just be getting a selection because maybe your technical communication job is really called online communication and design specialist, or scientific editor, or proposal writer, maybe even teacher, a totally different technical communication job than a proposal writer. So I'm hoping, because you've spent some time brainstorming about that trifecta, about your interests and sort of your capabilities, that then that will make approaching this document less overwhelming. And to really take a deep dive in, I want to offer you some examples from current technical communicators in the field. So what I'll be doing is I'll be going back here to our main document, And we're going to part 2, which is, what do technical communication jobs actually entail? And so what's challenging when you're searching for a job is that all you have to go on is what it says in the job advertisement. Usually until you get to the interview stage, you don't get to speak to anyone who's at that company or organization. So you don't really know if the job title and the position description really match the daily tasks. So what I've done here is these 3 examples come from my current graduate students in the technical communication program. And I've gotten their permission to be able to share this. So one of their assignments this week was to think about how their job as a technical communicator matches up with positions described in the textbook that we're reading for our class, which is called Solving Problems in Technical Communication. So you will see some references, since I sort of copy pasted what they wrote and didn't kind of adapt everything. So you'll notice like there are some citations from our textbook from this particular chapter that we read. But I want to talk you through some of these examples. Now, I don't expect you to read all of this text at one time. I'm just going to offer you the highlights, and then you'll have this as a resource if that interests you later. So the first example is someone who is a communication specialist at a university. And this person, I want to note, wouldn't normally have considered themselves a technical communicator. This person has a background in journalism. And so this person, thinks a lot about marketing and sort of working with the public, but they didn't really think of themselves as a technical communicator until they read this chapter on how their work lined up with technical communication. I want to emphasize some of their sort of key roles here. This person describes themselves as a user advocate when they're copy editing and reviewing materials like brochures and postcards, and thinking about if the design is conducive to the product's purpose and ensuring readability and accuracy. These, I would say, are classic roles of a technical communicator. So you can see how people, with so many different type of background, end up in technical communication work. Here's what's interesting. This person's specific workday. I think a lot of people, particularly undergraduates who don't have as much, experience, may not really know what a day in the life of a technical communicator entails. And since, just to take one example, if you became an English teacher in a public school or a proposal writer, those 2 days are so different. So I want to give you just a taste of kind of the different roles that people play and how that could impact your job search. So for example, this person's day depends on the time of year. As you know, universities run on a very specific schedule, kind of like public schools. But in terms of this person's role, there are these special fundraising days, such as the annual Day of Giving. Sometimes they do, for example, the Thanksgiving holiday is coming up. And so after that, they have dubbed the Tuesday after Thanksgiving to be Giving Tuesday. And by they, I mean marketing managers and the general public. So there are special days where there's a lot of emphasis on fundraising, and that's one of this person's, build jobs. They also are thinking through workflow, and just depending on what requires their attention. So in their role, this person is writing correspondence to donors, they're following up with people, they're updating the website, and they're trying to create really compelling communications materials, especially those that will compel people to donate to their university. So a note here, this person says, that all sounds a bit bland. And I suppose during slow times it can be. However, I think that many different types of jobs have different goals that involve fostering user or consumer advocacy. And I think a lot of people in a fundraising role wouldn't necessarily think of themselves as a user or consumer advocate. But this is just one example of how you really can kind of perform so many different roles in one job. And the way, thinking about how the way you think about your job also matters in how it kind of plays out in what your day looks like and how you approach that type of work. Interesting stuff. Example 2 is from someone who's sort of a classic technical communicator. They work in the manufacturing industry for an aviation company that tests things. And so this person, I believe I've had this person in class before, and over the years has moved up into higher and higher level roles. So these are some of the tasks. Include fielding information requests from customers about products and when they are approved, granting those requests by generating an NDA or a non-disclosure agreement, corresponding about PIN numbers needed by units, running calibration, troubleshooting requests, and then redirecting those requests to the vice president of their department and sales, and sort of doing the back end work to allow that product to become usable for the customer or the client. It's really interesting because this person is talking about how they're reminded of the significance of information and information design as they think about writers' contributions and also disclosure requirements. And this person is talking about hundreds of thousands of units that their company sells per year. So there is a lot going on. What's really neat about this kind of work is that this person is working directly with engineers and computer scientists and people with several different areas of specialization. Sometimes we call those SMEs or SMEs, subject matter experts. And so in this particular tech comm role, this person is doing a lot of collaboration. They're working on these different change requests and these different proposal requests. Also note that there's a note about hybrid working. So this person sometimes needs to physically visit a site where this material is being produced, where things are happening, but they mostly work remotely. So depending on sort of your kind of interests and your lifestyle and your needs, this kind of position might be more interesting or appropriate for you. And you can see this person's talking about drafting and editing and working with sort of technicians and trainers. So this role involves a lot of correspondence with different types of people. Then we have a third role, a proposal department manager. And this person indicates that they've worked at the same company since 2013, so 10 years, and they've moved up significantly. So they went from being a proposal coordinator to being a proposal manager. So previously, when they were a proposal coordinator, they created documentation that accompanied software, so including user guides, technical bulletins, and system release notes. But as the manager, they manage a team of proposal writers. So this job involves people management. And that's something that some people love to do. And sometimes other people say, no, 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 I really want to be on the ground doing the writing. I'm not sure I want to be in a management role. And so you can see through this person's description about all of the kind of procurements and different specific types of documentation that relate to proposal writing. And it's really nice. They actually laid out several different acronyms that will be of interest to you if you're interested in this area: RFPs, RFIs, RFQs. And so if you were to go into an interview with a little bit of a sense of that vocabulary, I certainly think it would help your chances of getting the job. And then this person dives into what their team specifically does. They blend information design and content or community management. And I think that's an interesting way to put it, because what they have to do is think about the requirements of each call and then find new ways to present the content that's interesting and add elements beyond the text. So this is a place where maybe doing that document design really comes in handy and is really part of the work. There's also this part of organization that's critical in terms of proposals. And as I mentioned with my own proposal, timing is critical. So this is a really time-sensitive position, certainly also like customer-oriented work or client-oriented work. There's a deliverable and there's a deadline. And so you're in charge of getting that deliverable completed and sometimes explaining why it can't be and why it wasn't completed and managing the fallout. And it's really interesting just to think about how all these different types of work have some similarities. A lot of them require editing, a lot of them require writing, and even have some of the same types of genres. So we have writing documentation, writing manuals, writing for outside audiences, but they're also completely different, which is really interesting. And all these people are technical communicators. So what I'd like to do now for the next 3 or 5 minutes is let's go back in some breakout rooms to think about your thoughts on all those different types of positions. So the question I want you to address is, does one position that I discuss interest you the most? Or do you like multiple positions? Or perhaps none of the positions interested you? So let's take just a couple of minutes and brainstorm a little bit about your own interests and how that would, translate into technical communication work. I'm going to open all the rooms. Welcome back. We're just waiting on a few more people. As you are talking and thinking, okay, looks like we've got just about everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for, all of the thinking and chatting you've been doing. I think the goal isn't to figure out what you need today, but to just get some ideas about what might be good for you in the future. So what I'd like to jump into is the Q&A. We've talked about a lot of things today. Specifically, we've thought about different job titles in technical communication. We've then looked at several descriptions of roles. And what's important to note is this is how employees self-described their responsibilities. So it'd be really interesting if I could go back and get their original job advertisement to see if those responsibilities line up with what the company wanted them to do initially. And we've also talked about sort of your personal preferences. We've talked about a Venn diagram, what you like, what you're good at, and what you are not very good at, or where you're still learning, or maybe just what you don't like and don't want to do. So at this point, I'd like to take questions. So I will mute. You're welcome to put questions in the chat. You're welcome to unmute, and you might even have a comment rather than a question, which is fine. I'm seeing a couple people typing in the chat. So let me respond to a question that someone asked me earlier. And that is, when it comes to people management, which is something that makes a lot of us nervous, would your decision to become a manager depend on the company or organization where you are? I think the answer is yes. One thing to think about is, in addition to getting your first job or your second job, is your long-term future, 5, 10, or 20 years out. In some roles, the only or the primary way to ascend the ranks is to become a manager of people. And so for some people, they will then decide, especially at a certain company. So let's take that case of a proposal coordinator who became a proposal manager. Let's say that person really didn't want to manage other people. Maybe they would then go to a different company that would allow them to have greater supervision of the proposal process, but not the same level of people management. It's also different to manage 2, 3, 4 people versus a team of hundreds. I have a friend who works for UPS, and she manages a team of 140 drivers. I don't think I could manage 140 people, but think of it in a different way. As a professor, sometimes I manage up to 100 students, meaning I teach up to 100 students per semester, depending on, the course load that I have. So in one role, that would be totally inaccessible to me. And in another role, it's challenging, but it's a challenge that I'm able to rise to. So I think these are all things that we want to think about. I'm seeing a question in our document. And again, feel free to type your questions directly in the document or in the chat, or certainly you can unmute. Here's the question. Can a creative writer actually succeed in tech writing, especially someone who's teaching themselves after getting their degree? There's no roadmap. How do you go about kind of getting and securing a job? Well, the first thing that I would do is I would read up on all of that information that the government has about technical communication and what is required. And I would make what I call a they want, I have chart. So especially if we go back to that first page that I think we were looking at here. So if you scroll back to the top of this document, I apologize, that it's a little bit lengthy. If you go to ONET, for example, in this list of tasks, what I would do is I would write out all the things that you know how to do and see how they match up with these specific tasks. For example, if you were a creative writer, you might have taken a publication course in which you worked for maybe the Cypress Dome or the Florida Review or another magazine or literature publication. So that would certainly involve potentially laying out material for the publication. Maybe you also edited things. Maybe you arranged and did organization and distribution of the material. Maybe as a creative writer, you also are interested in art more broadly, and you actually have some artistic skills. I have a lot of technical communication students who are really, really talented, maybe in graphic or digital art or in other mediums. And thinking about how you've worked with outside people, whether you call them customers or clients, and maybe that was an internal client. Maybe it was something for Sigma Tau Delta. Maybe you were working on something for the Department of English. All of those things are relevant when it comes to technical communication. So I think what you would need to do is write up a resume that focuses on content like this. So basically that it translates the skills that you learned in creative writing into technical communication speak. I think there's a lot more to be said about that, but I want to take a couple of questions to make sure that we get to everyone. So I'm happy to say more about this at the end. Dominic, I see your hand.
Yes, I have a question regarding resumes. So as someone who doesn't really have a lot of experience job-wise, but I've had experience in school, would you say a skills-based resume is more or less valuable than having a traditional resume?
Great question. I generally do not recommend a skills-based resume for people who are in undergraduate programs. The reason being is that they still don't have sort of the skills that someone who's been in the field for 20 years has. So if you're a traditional aged undergraduate, generally meaning 18 to 24, I don't think that would be appropriate. If you're someone who's returned to school, who's transferred, if you do have many years of experience or even 5 or 10, then a skills-based resume might be appropriate for you. I do think that when it comes to the sort of recent graduate resume, a lot of people will need to put class projects on their resume, not in lieu of experience, but as part of their experience. I can tell you firsthand that I've spoken with folks at L3Harris and several other Orlando area companies that recruit from our department. And one of the things that they value most is our students' experiences with collaborative writing. Someone actually said to me verbatim, exact words, that's what got this person the job. Because they already knew how to write collaboratively. So let's say you did a really great project for ENC 4294, client-based collaboration and documentation. I can't quite remember the exact name, but you may recall in that class, you do an outside client-based project. Put that on your resume. Consider who the client was, think about how you contributed to the team's project, what the results and outcomes were, and how it all worked out. And perhaps you've done other projects and other courses that you could put on your resume to sort of fill out any gaps. And just as a final thing, it's important to know that everyone realizes that people coming out of school may not have a lot of experience. And honestly, that's why they want to hire you, because you're new, you're fresh, you have sort of a lot of the latest and most interesting skills. And sometimes the skills that you have that are the most valuable are not clearly what you think they would be. Let me give an example. Getting really good at Microsoft Excel is something that, pardon my pun here, excels people to the top. A lot of people have a lot of difficulty with the technologies that we use in the workplace. So just by, for example, knowing how to use Google Docs, that is a huge asset. Knowing how to use Microsoft Teams, knowing how to use Mail Merge and some of these sort of tools that we may think of as everyday. And some of this is a little bit generational, but some of it is also just practice, that because you're in school, you're having experience with sharing Google Docs, you're using OneDrive, you're figuring out how to store and gather data, how to sort it, how to share it with other people. And so these are all also really helpful skills to put on your resume.
Thank you so much. Also, one more thing related to this. If you're putting classes or if you're putting projects that you've done for school on your resume, would it be redundant to put them on your portfolio too, or would you just have them on both?
Excellent question. Definitely have them on both.
Okay, nice. Just want to make sure.
Absolutely. Yes, we definitely, because we want to hear sort of the little synopsis of the project, and that's what we'll get on your resume. And then we want to see it. And I will say, if you're doing a Zoom interview, whether it's a first round interview or a later interview, if you know how to screen share and how to show that example from your portfolio, that will get you very far. Just kind of being savvy with things like Zoom and using screen share, and because it's also just an immediate way to demonstrate that you're good at something. It's one thing to say, you know, in my project team for ENC 4294, client-based collaboration and project management, my team was working on a brochure for a local nonprofit. Specifically, my role was to conduct sort of competitor research to understand how other people were marketing their nonprofits and how they were soliciting donations. Here's my example. So that's really wonderful. So, you know, I think just being able to do small things like that is really helpful. Now, I notice we're at 6:31, and I understand I'm sure some of you have to go. So thank you so very much for attending. I'm really appreciative. This recording will be available probably next week by the time I get things downloaded and shared. But I will stick around for anyone else who has questions. And for the rest of you, thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate it.